we are not defeating the Chinese, we're not defeating the Russians. So, but there's no discussions about alternatives, and I think that's why BRICS could be interesting. If the West could try to find a way of working with BRICS, as this would will reduce or mitigate this zero-sum mentality, and it would allow us to define our interest in other ways than a hegemony, which we can't restore. It becomes frustrating to see the the logic, and I'm almost afraid in this country to express my optimism about BRICS, because you're then seen as taking the other side. You're not loyal to us, and it's very strange that we can't divorce ourselves from this idea that the international system has to be dominated by the West, even though this reality is already gone.
And I think Europe is the most misguided of all. The United States, living in its delusions between two big oceans, can get away with things. But Europe is in Eurasia. It needs cooperation with Russia. It needs cooperation with China. It needs a safe, shared continental space. That is the absolute magnificence of what Gorbachev envisioned. He was, to my mind, although he's reviled in Russia as having presided over economic catastrophe, the truth is he was the greatest statesman of our time, because he was a person of peace at the end of a system that wasn't delivering and that depended on force. And he said, no more force. We're going to do it peacefully. And the tragedy is that the U.S. took that as, we win, you lose, rather than as saying, we all win, we now have peace, which was certainly how I heard things as a young person working to try to fulfill Gorbachev's vision of common prosperity from Rotterdam to Vladivostok, as he endlessly repeated, and as we always said at the time. The idea was Eurasia should be at peace, it should be cooperative, it should be productive together. By the way, European leaders once believed that, and they knew. Many of them thought, okay, now we don't need NATO anymore. They certainly knew in 2008, including some in your country, Glenn, who absolutely knew at the time that the U.S. push for NATO enlargement to Ukraine was a direct provocation. And what's a mystery for me is why Europe has gone silent at the political level of basic truths. That what's happening right now is destructive of Europe. It's a threat to Europe's security, not because of Russia, but because of this divide. And we need to stop the divide, not to go to war with Russia. Where are European leaders that 20 years ago would have said these things? And now they don't say them.
I just want to make two very last points. One is about Europe, which is very briefly, I think you're absolutely correct. We've had a report from Mario Draghi about how there is this deep economic malaise in Europe, which I think is true, by the way. But as many people are pointing out, he's not identifying the elephant in the room, which is the reason we are in this economic malaise, is because of the geopolitical policies which we have been following, which have been completely misguided. That's the one thing I want to say. The second point, now it's a very brief one, which is that I obviously live in Britain. I'm very familiar with the politics and society of Britain. Any system, which is what the British Empire was, which is built on ultimately oppression, is deeply atrophying for the people at the core. If you look at the problems that Britain has wrestled with for the last 50, 100 years, they are very much the products of the system that it created in the 18th and 19th century, and which have to this day not been overcome. And if we have problems starting to appear in the United States that people talk about. I think they are the product of the same cause. I think that's where it ultimately comes from. Not because the Chinese are good at producing things, it's because America itself is prioritizing geopolitical and power objectives over its own prosperity. That's all I just wanted to say.
And isn't it extraordinary to this moment when Britain can't hold it together in the NIH or on the streets that Keith Starmer's priority is deep missile strikes into Russia? How can this be, this delusion of grandeur? Because for Britain, this is now, I mean, the U.S. has a delusion of grandeur. It's not forgivable. I don't want to forgive it, but at least it's recent, in its bizarreness. Whereas for Britain, come on, after so many decades, this is a government comes in facing massive social problems, and the priority from the first moment is war with Russia, as if it's 1853. And Keith Starmer is Palmerston. How can this be?
Well, it can be if you have become addicted to this thing over hundreds of years.
I think you're right.
Which is what we have become. We think of that ourselves always in this way, and we can't kick the addiction. That is the fundamental problem. And the United States is at very, very serious risk of going down the same route. Just to say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think, Glenn, Alexander and I are both appealing to Norway. You're a voice of reason. Can you get some more reason in your fellow Norwegians? Because we need some rationality in this to say this is not right. Stop behaving like children. Children with nuclear arms, by the way, it's a bad combination. And so peace with Russia, peace with China, it would make a good deal for the world.
I think all common sense kind of went away, especially after 2022, because a switch went off, a very primordial instinct that once we felt war close, it's all us versus them. Everything was good versus evil. You can't really discuss what is good for our security. Has any of this benefited Ukraine? None of these discussions they're only assessed by the extent to which you demonstrate loyalty towards the in-group and show your hatred of Russia as a symbol of how good you are. So I even had these discussions, asked, wouldn't it be good if we had gone back to 2014, not toppled the government? Ukraine would have its territory, all these people wouldn't be dead. They would have, this would have been very different. But no, this would have been what Russia would have wanted. And the same with China. Wouldn't it be great if we wouldn't have gone into this economic war? Surely it's devastating American tech industries while China's able to pursue self-sufficiency and diversify. No, but that would be surrender. So you have this kind of, we would never begin at the point of departure. How would we enhance our economic or military security? It's always just pick the right side, good versus evil. It's a poison to the mind, I think. But yeah. Anyways, Jeffrey Sachs, Alexander Mercouris.